For more on the Global Hunger Report, we're now joined by Alexander Harper, who's the head of Crisis Insight at ACAPS. That's a non-profit organization that offers humanitarian data and analysis. Alexander joins us from The Hague. Thank you so much for your time. Is hunger today more about lack of food or lack of access to food?
Thank you, Folly. Well, I think it's a mixture of the two. I mean, we're in an unprecedented kind of global situation where we're seeing the price of food due to the global war and the global impacts of the war in the Middle East, underlying conflicts across the world and humanitarian crises, and then a big shift that we're seeing in terms of our ability as humanitarian responders to access those in needs. And this is what's really highlighted in the report. It's a fairly terrifying global picture, and really it's what the report says about the underlying numbers that is really stark in its context. It's the lowest country coverage of this report in a decade. 18 countries have no comprehensive data on needs. And the report states that the integrity of the data systems underpinning this analysis is fundamentally at risk. And we see this reflected in our own analysis.
Right.
Now, two things are largely driving this.
And so before we get to that, I just want to ask you a bit more about what you said there, this being the lowest country coverage, and that because of the lack of data. Tell us more about the more severe situations. We read that nearly 2/3 of those affected are in just 10 countries. Why is that? Why is hunger concentrated in these places? What do they have in common?
Well, you tend to see the worst like we've just been seeing on Yemen. Many of the worst situations for food insecurity are in states that have been affected by conflict or economic crisis or other types of crisis for decades. They're long-term crisis situations, and these are often the most difficult for humanitarian responders, not only to respond at scale, especially as we're seeing increasingly access to the data to understand those needs, alongside our ability to actually respond to those needs eroded by basically the broader erosion of humanitarian norms, international humanitarian law, and the protection of aid workers themselves.
And so the report also highlights catastrophic hunger in places like Gaza, Sudan, Yemen, which we saw. Are these areas close to declaring famine?
Yes, I think they're very close to declaring famine, and there are definitely pockets of famine in many of these countries that's been highlighted in a great deal of the UN reporting. The problem we have is that whether or not it's declared famine or not, we don't know. The humanitarian response at large is increasingly losing its eyes and ears. So you may have famine, you may not have famine, but the problem is it's very difficult for us to understand how severe needs are in places where aid workers themselves have been shot and killed on a daily basis.
Right. And of course, there is the Middle East ripple effect, and behind all these numbers are real people. Tell us about some of the stories you're hearing and what the long-term effects hunger will have on a generation, and what immediate actions could prevent the situation from worsening.
Well, I think in terms of immediate actions, the biggest problem we're facing now is that there's no money to support those in need. And alongside this problem, which is also very important to deal with less money, is our ability to see where the needs are and to actively prioritize how to respond to those needs. I mean, as the report you mentioned highlighted, some countries such as Burkina Faso, we don't have any information. This is for various reasons. So it's incredibly hard for donors and responders to even make decisions to allocate resources, even though people may be far more needy in one place than another. We're not able to make those evidence-based decisions to support them.
Alexander Harper, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us about this. Alexander Harper is from ACAPS, joining us there from The Hague. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Polly.